And you told me when you're looking at the helmets, before all those helmets were white, correct?
And they were white leather helmets.
White leather helmets, and,
Right.
and the Browns were one of the first teams to move to color helmets. Is that correct?
Well, in the AFC, they wore white helmets. Paul Brown was very simplistic. He was very bland. He liked things normal. He didn't like excitement. He didn't like flash. Case in point, when he started the Cincinnati Bengals in 1967 in the American Football League, somebody designed a helmet with tiger stripes on it. And Paul Brown said, that's just too much for me. They just had the orange dome with the word Bengals on it. So he's a very simplistic person as far as everything. He was very regimented. He was very a man by the schedule. And so they wore solid white leather helmets from 1946 to 1949 in the AFC. Well, they merged into the NFL in 1950 along with the San Francisco 49ers and the Baltimore Colts. The rest of the AFC teams folded and were dispersed among all the other teams. Well, the NFL had a rule that for night games, you could not wear white helmets or light colored helmets, white or light colored jerseys, or white or light colored pants. Well, the Detroit Lions wore silver helmets. So for night games, they wore blue. And the reason behind this is the NFL played with a white football at night. They didn't want a fumble to occur or a helmet to come off or somebody's pants to blend in with the football. So they had this rule. So in 1950, they were forced to have a different colored helmet. And for whatever reason, Paul Brown chose orange over brown for night games. Now they wore either white, they wore brown jerseys at night. But if you look at games from 1950, say against the Brooklyn Dodgers, which were blue and white, they wore blue helmets at night and white helmets during the day. You'd have a dark blue helmet for the Brooklyn team and a brown helmet for the Browns team. So there wasn't much contrast.
Yeah, if you look at that is such a, a lot of people don't even know the football was white. Back then, there's a lot of places at stadiums that didn't have lights at night.
Or it was inadequate. It was horrible. The technology was bad. So they used a white football. Well, so the Browns used a combination of orange helmets at night and white helmets during the day for 2 years, 1950, 1951. Well, in 1952, there had been plastic helmets, but the first ones that came out had a flat top to them. Then they would break easily. And then the major problem is that where the earpiece is, the piece that comes underneath it, that would crack. And so finally they came out with a new technology by Rydell, a sporting goods company. And in 1952, Paul Brown just said, forget all this painting, these helmets. And he ordered a whole set of orange helmets for the entire team, plastic helmets.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's even innovation going back to then. You say Rydell, I just remember those little button-up chin straps and
Sure.
button-up earpieces in the old traditional 1980s and early 90s helmets. You brought me a little tidbit, and the Browns have, kind of gone in their years, the last recent few years, going back to the traditional colors. One thing that they did do is they did bring back some of those orange pants from the 70s.
Yeah.
They've also matched those. And then they've also done something which I'm a huge fan of, was the throwback jerseys which they wore, I believe, the second game of the season against the, was it the Bears? I think it was the Bears. Yes, it was the Bears.
Yeah.
And I think the NFL is going to allow them to wear those, I believe, 3 times this year, give or take 3 times. But you said something which is I'm excited about, is they're actually going to have the white helmets as well, and the league has approved those as well. How did those white helmets come to be, And will you think more teams will move to two separate different helmets that will be able to be used during the season?
Yeah, the NFL traditionally forever has approved one color helmet for a team. You can decorate it any way you want, but still, if you're with the Steelers, you're going to have a black helmet. That's the color that they chose. Although up until 1962, they wore yellow helmets. Well, the Browns have approved to use an orange helmet, and they can do anything they want to with their orange helmet. Of course, they do the two brown stripes and the one single white stripe. But even when they do throwback, like against the Bears, they wore the 1957 through 1959 helmet, which is a single white stripe, and then on the side of the helmet had the jersey number in brown of the player. Traditionally, those are called the Jim Brown helmets because Jim Brown came into the league in 1957, and that was the first time that they used that. But this year, they allowed teams to have a secondary color for helmets, and the Browns chose white. And the reason they chose white is because it it melds in with the 1946 throwback jersey. Now, they've already worn that, and that is a white jersey with a brown number and then an orange drop shade. Now, what's interesting about that is they also had a brown jersey that had an orange number with a white drop shade that they only used 2 games in 1946. And the reason they only used it for 2 games is because it was hard to read, because orange is a dark color. Brown is a dark color. So it's not like it was an orange number that was outlined in white. It was an orange number that had a white drop shade to it. So from a distance, sports writers who were keeping stats, newspaper writers who were trying to write a story about the game, they couldn't tell who recovered the fumble or who caught the pass or who made the tackle. So they used those for 2 games and then abandoned them. So for the rest of the 1946 season, they used a brown jersey with a solid white number. But the 1946 white jerseys with the brown numerals and the orange drop shades, they look cool to me.
I love them. Love them.
What
I
was
think people
weird?
love them.
What was weird, Garrett, is they only used them 1 year.